pointed at me right now.
Pointed at you. Rotation them off, rotate the device. What's going on here? Okay.
Hello?
All right. Okay, guys, sorry, technical difficulties. These are just getting worked out. Right. Okay, I think I'm there. You can see everybody's expressions as well, so you guys should change their orientation, so it just shows me. Okay.
So we can't fall asleep, right?
Yeah, so just in case the expressions go the way that I didn't plan, let me get...
I just hope it doesn't reverse direction.
Right. Let me just get this water. Okay, full disclosure, everybody, this is psyllium husk. So before I was taking baking soda, and that looked even more suspicious. So this at least is a little bit more. Yeah, it's getting off to a fun start. All right, here we go. I actually showed it to the guy. He just said, "Go ahead." It's more suspicious before I give a talk and I put white powder on my... What's going on here? A really good talk.
Well, I was surprised when the last teacher said that we used caffeinated. I didn't know that was part of the precept.
Oh yeah, monks and tea and coffee. Yeah. Okay, great. So I think everything is set. We're kind of in order here. Great. So I'll just start by paying homage to the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang dhammang sanghang namasami. So today we're going to talk about a topic which I actually have a bit of a fascination with, which is the practice of lay people at the time of the Buddha, and especially a discrepancy between whatever the common practices might be right now and how they were done at the time of the Buddha. And there's a purpose to this. It's because, especially as monastics here, meet many kind of very dedicated lay people who have given up a lot. I've met lay people who have decided actually not to have children. They were about to have children, and they thought, well, we're not going to have it because it will get in the way of our Dhamma practice. And then they chose businesses that would enable them to go on retreats. I met lay people, there's lay people here that you can meet here who essentially they come home from work, and then when they come home from work, they start doing Dhamma work. They're kind of full time. And behind all of these lay people's motivations, who are very serious often, is the desire for the noble attainments, and especially stream entry. So at the time of the Buddha, there were many, many noble disciples. And not just at the time of the Buddha, that is still the case in some Buddhist countries. But we'll get into some of that a bit later. And so one of the things that we want to do when we look through the Pali Canon to try to see what the differences are, to try to look at specifically how the Buddha recommended that lay people should practice, and then take it on almost like a checklist, right? There can be this, I know when I was a layman, there would be these kind of times when I was practicing and I would see that there was something that I should do, or thought that I should do, and I think, well, that doesn't matter, I'll just do a little bit more of this other thing. But we can think of the way that the Buddha laid down his teachings in the Pali Canon, especially when he lays them down in broad strokes, almost like a chemistry formula. And you want to try to have the parts in balance and in place as much as possible. Now, almost like, it's not exactly like. So one of the things that's often taught is that there's this mode of practice that's for lay people, right? Okay, you've got the lay practice, and then there's this mode of practice that's for monks. And they're two separate but equal paths. What we'll come to see as we go through and look at the Buddha's recommendations for lay people is actually there's only one Noble Eightfold Path, and it applies equally to anybody who wants to reap its fruits. So for monastics, what you can see as you look at the rules that the Buddha's laid down, at the dress code that monastics have, is that it's streamlined. The Buddha has streamlined monastic life so that you don't have to think about it much. I mean, actually, our life is coded in such a way that if you want to do anything except spend a lot of time meditating, pretty much anything, you run into all these kind of, I say, like speed bumps. You know, it's kind of coming down this road with Lal Mahati. I mean, you can go down the road, but you know, you're going along and there's this bump, you have to slow down and then carefully go up and then carefully go over. You can't just plow through the road. So pretty much anything that you want to do, just about, other than spending your day meditating, going on Pindapata, wandering, the things that you saw the Buddha doing, there are these kind of like little obstacles that get put in place, and they can grow larger depending on how far outside of the norms of monastic life you want to wander. So what this means is that monastic life is streamlined. It's like a valley, and the slopes point towards a river at the bottom. And in the same way as a monk, if you try to climb up the side of the slope, the rules will tend to push you back down. The community will tend to push you back down. And so all monks have this, monastics have this kind of advantage that the Buddha has created a container for us. And that container means that there's less variation in the monastic life. So in lay life, there's a great deal more variation. You can have people who are living in cultures that are incredibly divergent. You can have people doing jobs that are incredibly divergent. Like one person might be I was listening to Bhante Sanata Vihari, he's talking about like a psychotherapy. That's one job you can do. And your day will look very different than somebody who's a stock trader, right? Completely different. You're a stock trader, your day will look very different than somebody who's a plumber. Sometimes if you have 3 or 4 kids and you're a mother or father, your day looks very different than somebody who has no children at all. And so lay life can be like this wide plain, and you can range just about anywhere that you want in this plain. It's very vast, but unfortunately there's only a narrow path relatively within this plain that leads to the goals that people want to achieve. So one of the first things that we want to do as we come to try to practice as lay people is to try to narrow the range in which we operate, to try to cut some of the extra fabric off the material that we want to shape. And so one of the first places that we look to for this is the 5 precepts. So it sounds like something very simple, and probably everybody has heard what the 5 precepts are. It's rare that people keep them. It's something that you learn as a monk. You kind of, see what people are up to. And they keep the precepts sometimes, and sometimes they don't. Quite often, it's rare that people will keep them stably. So, sometimes you'll go to somebody's house or something, you don't say anything, they're a staunch Buddhist, and you notice, oh, there's a whole rack full of wine, and you're right there on the floor. I mean, it looks like it's ready to pop,
We have the opposite to you. You have all these bumps between you and doing other than meditation.
Mm-hmm.
We have all these bumps in the way of meditation.
Yes, that's right. That's right. So,
and they're probably a lot bigger and stronger, actually.
Yeah, they can be, a bit like cliffs, but you can climb them. And these are ones that you want to climb in order to narrow the range in which you're operating in this field. So a lot of what people fear in keeping the 5 precepts is the loss of the relationships with other people. And I've heard this over and over again in Buddhist countries, and also experienced it myself when I was a young man. If you start to keep the 5 precepts strictly, people want to hang around with you less. Somehow you become like less fun in a way, but in another way you can become more fun. Actually, when I was a young man, I started keeping the 5 precepts really strictly. I was 18 at the time, so that's prime party time. And I would go to these nightclubs with my friends. I still went, but I was just sober. And if you go to a nightclub and you're sober and everybody else is drunk, you get an idea of what it feels like to be a genius, Holy, that's like, like I'm easily the smartest guy in this. Yeah. Or like an amazing professional dancer. I mean, drunk people think they're really good dancers. They're not really that good, or they think they're very good conversationalists. Suddenly you have like so many more IQ points over them. So highly recommend. It's something that you can do. staying sober when other people are drunk. And what that will do is it will pull your mind back from the world to a certain extent. So the Buddha has this metaphor of a person who attains stream entry, and it's this metaphor of a cloth that takes dye. So the attachments that we have to things in the world are like dirt on the dye. And it's kind of worked into the dye. Anybody who's had to kind of dye cloth before may know it's much easier to dye cloth that is not dirty, that's not soiled, and that doesn't have other dyes in it already. If it already has other dyes, it doesn't come out the color that you want. So if we remove our attachments to the world in this small way, what it does is it cleanses the cloth a little bit. So another important thing that the Buddha recommends for lay people is that because lay people can't spend their whole day practicing meditation, again, monks are kind of pushed that way, what he does is he takes the elements of lay life and turns them into a primary practice for lay people. So a lot of the ways that people build their identity in lay life come from the opinions, come from the praise and blame that other people give them or that they take away. So I have a friend, and when we were young, he wasn't like a really strong guy, wasn't like a really buff guy or anything like this. So he was at like a lower, not like a lower, but not like the top guy, like the football captain or the big popular people in high school are like really beautiful bodies and are good athletes. So he was a bit of a lower rung. As he got older, he got this successful painting business, and his whole attitude towards himself changed. Because now he had money. He's making all this money. He was always talking about how much money he had. And so whoever he went and associated with, he was a painting business owner. So if he associated with his mother, painting business owner. Associating with her like that. He comes and sees me, I'm a monk, he's the painting business owner, right? He goes and associates with his friends. I'm also his friend, painting business owner. Everything is painting business owner, painting business owner, painting business owner. This is who I really am. So as long as you can maintain an identity like that you are a painting business owner and you have money and people should respect you, then it feels good. And the more that he does that, the more concrete that identity becomes. Now, of course, as Buddhists, we know Buddhists are people interested in Buddhism, interested in meditation. We know what the danger of that is. When the painting business fails or doesn't do as well, or people don't really care about his painting business, he sometimes gets angry, kind of like gets into like a rage or something like this, starts, insulting people. So our self-identity is often built from the praise and blame that other people give us as lay people, and the ways in which we interact with them concretize that self-identity. So the Buddha's teachings on not self are not an abstract philosophical concept. What they're meant to point to is that we can deconstruct what we place the weight of our happiness on so that we don't suffer when it changes. So one of the biggest recommendations that the Buddha has for lay people is that when they interact with these 6 different classes of people, they change their personality. They change the way that they act. So when you interact with your mother, you're a son or a daughter and not a painting business owner. Right? You go from being this really big guy, like, I'm going to own the painting business, I got all these guys working for me, I got a truck, and you go and see your mother, all of a sudden you're the son, and you're, can I help you, vacuum the rug, mom, right? Or whatever it might be. You become a lower person. Your status becomes lower based on the person you're engaging with. If you engage with your teachers, then again your status changes. You become a lower person, not a higher one. And if you engage with your children, your status flips. You become a higher person and not a lower one. And so essentially what this does is it teaches people how to apply the principle of not self in a very practical way by changing their personality the way that you would change a hat, the way that you would change a coat. You take selves on and you put selves on and you take them off according to the situation at hand. And what this will do is allow people to ride the crest of the wave of life, surf it, rather than get swept under it much more easily. And this is a very, very important skill. And it will pull the mind back further from the world and cleanse the cloth more. So another important aspect of these relationships that the Buddha teaches is that the relationships with mutual duties. So a mother has duties to her son, and a son has duties to his mother. So it's not just like you give everything to one person and you don't get anything in return, or they give everything to you and you don't get anything in return. All relationships have to be mutually balanced, and there's duties that go with each of them. So what this means in principle, I mean, it's good to read the list and know the actual bullet points that are under each relationship, and one can literally try to fulfill these bullet points. For your mother and father, you want to take care of them when they're ill. If you're a lay person, that means sacrificing a whole lot of fun. Actually, I know a person who's taking care of her mother right now. I've actually known a couple people in the recent past, and it's like a full-time job. Actually, anybody who's ever had a sick parent, I myself has had sick parents, and take a sick parent, and it's hard work. It's like full-on hard work, and you don't get praised for it usually. You usually get blamed by the people you're trying to help and by your relatives. If you didn't do something that they wanted you to do or whatever it is, they think you should have done this or that, then they'll blame you. Right? But you're the one who's doing all this work. And that's a sacrifice that we have to prepare for if we're lay people to make. And so in doing this, we're fulfilling our duties to our mother. There's also duties that we have to our children to provide them with things like education, etc. There's duties that we have to our teachers to show them respect. There's duties that we have to our friends to be there for them in times of difficulty, not to forsake them, and to teach them things that are good. Not to be their companions in going out and partying, but to be their companions in going out to a Buddhist event or something like this. So all these duties have these mutual relationships, and it's good to learn the bullet points, but the principles that exist behind the bullet points is that these relationships need to be balanced. They can't be a one-sided relationship. So when we think about where a lot of people's suffering comes from in their life as lay people, when you talk to people, as a monk, there was at Newbury Buddhist Monastery about a week ago, and Ajahn Nisarano said, as monks you do a lot of counseling. It's kind of true if you're a religious person, you have this role as a priest as well as a renunciant. And one of the areas in which people suffer a lot is when they want somebody to be a part of their life and that person doesn't want to be. Or they want somebody to be a part of their life in a particular way and that person doesn't want to fit the mold. They don't want to play that game. When that happens, then the person suffers a lot because they feel like, oh, I've done this and this and this, you should do this for me. Now, of course, there's a certain reasonableness to this. We've discussed balance. But one of the realities of the world where we learn about the principle of anicca, we talk about these words, right? Anicca, we think, the cosmos, you get this image of galaxies, just expanding in this beautiful wheel and blowing up, and people want to see that in their meditation, right? I saw people want to see the galaxy blowing up, and that's really cool. You could tell people about that. But where you see the principle of anicca operating in the lives of people who are engaged in the world is when people who you want to associate with change. And this is where a lot of suffering comes from in lay life. The people who you care about, the people who you want to be a certain way, don't end up being that way. This is anicca. So what does it mean then to realize anicca, or to practice with anicca in this case? It means that if somebody is showing that they want to pull away from you, you have to let them go. You can't hold on to people. I had this Zen teacher, and he said he had a phrase, I think it was him. Anyways, a Zen phrase. It was basically let go or be dragged. So you can see this when people chase after other people, like a boyfriend, a girlfriend, a friend, a parent, or a sibling. They're showing they want to recede. You chase after them, and they're like, okay, you want to hang around with me. Now you've got to give 1 point more. Before you were at 1 point to hang around with me, now you've got to give 2 points. And I'm giving 1 point less. So what that means is now they're at +2, you're at -1 in that relationship. If you keep chasing them, it can go up to they're at +3, you're at -2. And there's potentially almost no limit to how far that can go. Some people get into these relationships in which they're trying to hold another person, and they're at such a deficit in terms of the balance of give and take that they're suffering immensely, and it's very difficult for them to function. Now, however many galaxies you see expand or explode in your meditation, if you can't let go of somebody who wants to recede, from you, then you are not recognizing the most practical application of anicca. And if you can recognize that and let these people go, then your ability to be affected by the world, the ability for the world to affect you, will reduce significantly. It will go down significantly when you let the people go, who show through their nonverbal actions that they want to go. So a lot of this actually requires a certain knowledge of human dynamics. So for lay people or monks in general, actually learning about human social behavior is something that's important, actually. I mean, I think you can get away a little bit without knowing how to do that if you're like a computer programmer, maybe. Because I hope nobody, is anybody here a computer programmer? Oh, Eddie's Eddie's a nice guy, so I mean, I wasn't thinking about Eddie specifically. Yeah. So if you get a job where you don't have to interact with people, I don't think that's Eddie. He's out there in the community, and he's a nice guy. I've rode in the car with him before. But you might not have to learn as many social skills. But if you want to be able to balance your relationships, you will have to learn social skills. And a big part of this is learning how to interpret people's nonverbal behavior. Like, what are they telling you with their actions, rather than what are they telling you with their words? So humans, when we evolved, we started off as monkeys, and then we became, like a half monkey that kind of walked, and, then we became like a bit of a taller monkey. And all the time we were these monkey-type beings, we didn't have speech. We only had nonverbal behavior, the behavior of our bodies, the behavior of our eyes, the behavior of our face. And we use this nonverbal behavior to communicate with others. So what it means is that type of nonverbal behavior is hardwired into humanity. And humans are very good at hiding their actions through their verbal behavior. They are very bad at hiding their intentions through their nonverbal behavior. That's something very hard to hide. As you can notice this right away. Kind of sometimes you're talking to people about a particular topic. If their face lights up, it means they're happy about it. Sometimes when you're talking to people about a particular topic, their face suddenly takes a downturn like this. That means they don't like what you're talking about. You don't know why. I mean, their facial expression isn't going to convey to you the specifics of why they don't like it, but it means they don't like it, and they can't really hide it. There's ways that they can maneuver and position their bodies, their feet, that show that they're uncomfortable or comfortable. And there's a whole range of nonverbal behaviors you can learn about. But perhaps the most important one, the most obvious, if somebody stops returning your texts, right? I mean, if you're talking to them, they're getting like increasingly angry when you talk to them. If they're always requiring you to give more, this is nonverbal behavior, which indicates that they don't want to have a balanced relationship. And so one has to be prepared to let that go. Now, if one does let this go, then what will happen is the antenna of one's mind tends to go up. So when we're enmeshed with a person, when we're enmeshed with an idea, it's like a radio with its antenna down. It just picks up like one station. You can kind of try to tune it or whatever, but it only tunes into one station. If you put the antenna up, all of a sudden you hear all these different stations when you turn the dial. And it's the same way when we practice renunciation correctly. Suddenly the antenna goes back up and we start to notice, oh, there's billions of people in the world. I thought there was just this one person. And this will allow us to ride the crest of relationships much better, to balance our relationships with other people, and this will pull the mind back further. This will help to cleanse the cloth when we can let go of people in line with anicca, and when we can let go of who we are depending on who we interact with. And this is a further step. So the Buddha also has very strong recommendations around people for their work. I once listened to or looked up this website, and it was called 80,000 Hours. And it was a career counseling service. It was called 80,000 Hours because the average person spends 80,000 hours at their job. So that's more time than you're going to spend doing just about anything else, working at your job. So in terms of cutting the cloth, the Buddha has these 5 things that a lay person can't do. They can't engage in trade in meat, in living beings, in poisons, in weapons, and let's see, what was the other one? You guys know? Alcohol, that's right, and intoxicants. So those 5, if one is engaging in any of those behaviors, then that is a significant obstacle to one's progress. So if one has a restaurant, one wants to become a sotapanna, you might have to stop serving meat. You might have to stop serving alcohol. And this is where I start to gauge, how badly do I actually want this? How badly do I really want to achieve the noble attainments, and can I check this off of my list? If you can check that off of your list, then the field that you're moving on narrows and your path becomes easier to walk. So another really important one, oftentimes people want to hear like very esoteric explanations of things, but one of the other big areas in which lay people engage with the world is money. So the Buddha actually has quite a number of recommendations around money and how to spend money, how to handle money. I mean, I'm not a financial advisor. This won't get into financial advice. Other than that, the Buddha says to try to make sure that you have no debt and to try to make sure that whatever money you spend is less than what you earn. Now, again, as a monk, when you talk to people about what it is that makes them suffer, one of the big things that comes up is their job. Their job and their money, their job security. And why are they so afraid of losing their job? Often it's because they have debt. If they lose their job, they lose their house and they can't support their kids, or they lose their car, or they lose some other significant thing that is actually not under their ownership now. It's under the ownership of the bank. So I actually have an uncle, and he is actually quite a wealthy man for a while. He was like, what do you call it, like the C-suite. He worked in the C-suites in some of the companies in Canada. He was like a chief marketing officer, like reported to the CEO. And he was always, he was always broke. He didn't, not always broke, but he wasn't like saving a lot of money. But he had a lot of really nice things. So it can be this way, no matter how much money a person has, if they spend more than they earn, then they will always be under somebody else's leverage. If you're free from debt, then you will be free from the leverage of other people to a much greater extent. So there was a time when I was riding on this bus. I used to take a lot of buses in Canada. And the bus driver said to me, yeah, I've got a mechanic shop. I was like, oh yeah, where is it? And we talked. He told me where his mechanic shop was. And then he said to me, he's like, yeah, we don't have any debts. Don't really care how many people come in. I just go there on Saturday. If people come, then yeah, it's fine. He's like, we don't need to make money. He's already paid off his building. So this is the happiness of freedom from debt. And a lot of the pain, the agony, the ways that the world can push a person around is because they're enmeshed with debt. And why do they have debt? It's because in order to live a certain lifestyle, they take it on. So when you pull your desires back from the world enough to eliminate debt, it will simplify your lifestyle. And again, this will pull you back from the world, and it will cleanse the cloth. And it will also make you more and more imperturbable, less and less able to be touched by the ways of the world. So when you keep the 5 precepts, when you have right livelihood, when you're able to balance your relationships, when you have no debt to anybody large or small, when you keep more money than you earn, the Buddha also instructs you should save about 25% of your money. I don't know how many people could do that, but this is for back in the days when people were sole proprietors. The Buddha has another instruction which you can take on immediately, but that is almost never taken on. Actually, I was saying this a lot a couple years ago. I don't know anybody who takes this on, and constantly saying. And then a couple people took it on, so I became very, very happy. But in the Pali Canon, one of the strongest recommendations for lay people, like almost one that comes through like so many different suttas, is that the Buddha recommends that lay people keep the 8 precepts once a week. It comes up once a week. And the 8 precepts here means keeping them from dawn until dawn the next day. So what that means is that the 8 precepts, you will not be eating after noon, one day of the week, or after midday. One will not be engaging in entertainments, watching movies. One will sleep on a low bed, usually on the floor, or put one's mattress on the floor. And for that day, one would also be a celibate person. So this actually has quite a powerful effect, even though it's just one day a week. I remember when I was a young guy at the Zen temple, I was training to be a Zen priest, and Zen priests are not, they can get married and they can have girlfriends and these things. And there was this young girl there who was kind of interested in me. And I started to keep these 8 precepts once a week. I wasn't really interested. I was kind of interested in the Zen priest training. So I started keeping these 8 precepts once a week. And I lost all this weight. Like I used to go to the gym and work out, and I could not maintain the muscle mass that I had, no matter how much I tried, after I started keeping these 8 precepts. And then one day she said to me, she's like, "You need to get bigger. Bigger than me." So like, shrunk down to the point where I was thinner than she was. So, so I mean, that probably, tripped up some potentials for dates or whatever it might have been. So if you keep these 8 precepts, then it has a surprisingly powerful effect on the degree to which one is enmeshed in the world, on the degree to which other people will engage with you. It's surprising how much, if you stop keeping entertainment one day a week, it affects your relationships with your friends. I mean, it doesn't mean that you won't have them. It just affects it. It's like, hey, you want to go out today? Well, this is the day for keeping the 8 precepts, right? And people they don't have like a calendar per se where they're just like, okay, no problem, it's just this one day. They have this thing in their mind usually where it's like, my buddy's there, I'm going to call him, we're going to go out and do something fun. And if it happens a few times that you can't, it doesn't destroy the friendship, but it pulls it back. And so what this means is that, again, you will be removing yourself somewhat from the world. You'll be pulling back somewhat from the world, but the benefit to this pulling back is that it creates space for meditation to grow. So there's another sutta in which the Buddha talks to Anathapindika. Anathapindika comes to the Buddha with 500 lay followers. And the Buddha says to Anathapindika, Anathapindika, you shouldn't just practice generosity. I'm paraphrasing here. He said you should also try to abide in those attainments, those absorptions that are peaceful. So in other words, he's telling Anathapindika to cultivate the jhanas, to cultivate meditation. Now, one of the things about the happiness that a person gets from meditation is that it exists almost in opposition. Not totally in opposition, but almost in opposition to one's ability to consume outside happiness. It's almost like if one wants more of one has to trade in the other a little bit, right? I mean, at first, if a person's doing like some really bad stuff, like evil stuff that they don't want to have to do, have these really bad habits, you eliminate that, okay, one's sensual pleasures might go up, and that is a part of what meditation can help with. You can get better at your job, Things could taste better if you want to stay in the present moment and focus on the taste. They could be tastier. But actually, as it goes along, there's a certain peace that you get just from practicing meditation, only from making the mind still. And you may have noticed this when you come off of a retreat. You kind of meditate for a long period of time, you come off of a retreat, and you may feel a certain peace inside. That's not related to you of having had like an ice cream cone, right? Or like having had somebody say something really nice to you, praise you. It's just related to your having practiced meditation. Now, this type of peace, you can see trying to grow it like planting a seed in a plot of land. And if that plot of land has all kinds of really, really big trees growing on it, when you try to plant the seed, you can still make it grow, right? It'll still grow, but it won't grow really strong, right? Kind of grow, and you'll have to like manage it, and sometimes it might look like it's getting sick, and it won't shoot up to become like a really huge, strong tree because there's too many other trees blocking the sunlight. So our meditation practice actually operates on similar principles. The greater our degree of reliance on things external to us for happiness, the less potential for us to cultivate this happiness that exists inside. So actually, these types of happiness are almost like a trade. So the Buddha says, make a trade, the lower type of happiness for the higher type. And these are types of happiness that graft differently. They're a type of happiness that starts small, but grows larger the more that one cultivates it. So when one pulls one's mind back from one's engagement with like alcohol or drugs or one breaks the 5 precepts, one gets space in the mind. One knocks down some trees. When one pulls one's identity back from engagement with other people, from relying on their opinions, from not being able to take off one hat and put on another, one cuts down more trees in the field. When one eliminates one's attachment to consuming things outside to the extent that one doesn't have debt, that one doesn't spend more money than one earns, then one cuts down more trees. And when that field is more clear, it's much easier to plant the seed and to water the seed and have it grow. So you may notice this. There's times when your meditation seems to progress, seems to go well, times when it seems to be blocked. You investigate the times that it seems to be blocked. It may be related to something that one has attached to, something that one doesn't want to let go of. So as one has practice in this way that the Buddha recommends, then one can start to do what's called taking on a satipatthana. Now this word satipatthana, it gets translated in different ways. What it means is an establishing of mindfulness or a foundation for mindfulness. So when we think about the foundation for our world, where it usually is, usually the foundation for our world, if we're just going through a normal life, actually a lot of it rests on the opinions of other people. A huge amount of it, like much more than we would normally recognize. When we think about it, in a country like Australia, pretty much everybody has enough to eat, right? I mean, everybody's got, like, pretty much, there are a few, people, unfortunately, can be homeless, but I think that there's also public housing solutions here, like there are in Canada, and so that is a much lower risk than in other places. So many people have enough to eat, many people have shelter. There's probably free healthcare here too, I'm guessing? Commonwealth country. Free healthcare, yeah. Also free healthcare. Medicine is taken care of. All these physical things that you need are taken care of. And so where does the desire, where does the push, where does this incredible force to get things like a huge house or like a really nice Mercedes-Benz come from? I mean, it oftentimes doesn't come from the car or like the house. I mean, if you have a really huge house, you've got to clean the huge house. And unless you can afford a maid, that's a lot extra work. Now you have 6 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. There's 2 people living in the house. What are you going to do with that? Now you got to vacuum it, right? You got to mop the floor. It's a hassle. But if you live in a particular neighborhood, people will treat you differently. They may invite you to different parties. When they ask you where you live, they'll treat you differently. When they come and see your house, they'll treat you differently. Many people have ridden in all kinds of cars. I rode in this car. A relative of mine had bought this sports car. A relative, it was kind of this Mercedes, a BMW sports car. Really low to the ground. You ever seen these things? They only have 2 seats, super low to the ground. You're thinking, wow, that looks really cool car. You just hop in that thing, go. Anyway, so I got in the car, and the seats they almost feel like they're at this 45-degree angle. They're not straight up. They're like this. So you get in the car and you're kind of like this. And then you're really low to the ground. So as you're driving, if there's any bump in the road, your whole body shakes. And when you try to get into it, you have to kind of go like this and, hunch down. It's almost like, what do you call it? What's that thing where there's the pole and you got to go into the pole? I can't remember what that's called now. We used to play that. What's it called? Limbo. Some of you do the limbo to get in these cars. And then to get out of them again. It's not really a comfortable car to be in. And, it just seats 2 people. It doesn't seat a whole bunch of people. So why would you want to have a car that much that you pay so much more money for it? It's because of what other people think about the car. That's why it has value in general. If you pull up into a gas station with a BMW sports car, people treat you differently. If you pull up to a party with a BMW sports car, people treat you differently. Anywhere you go with your BMW sports car, people will treat you differently, and it's worth enduring the bumps of the rocks and doing the limbo to get in and out of the car because these people treat you differently. And that's where a lot of a person's world rests. That's how they create the world, and that's the foundation for their mindfulness. What is it that other people think about me? And what values are they ascribing to me and the things that I own? Now, obviously, there's a lot of, you can get some happiness from that. People are friendly sometimes they're not. So you get this kind of pain. But if we take the weight of our mindfulness and shift it from the opinions of the world to a topic of meditation, that becomes the foundation of our mindfulness. So usually the way that you want to do this is you want to test out different topics of meditation. and see which ones have a very good fit, have a very good feel for you, like eating different types of food. You eat a type of food, it tastes really, really good. You eat more of it. I mean, probably good for your, not a candy bar, but feels good for your body, right? You eat more of the foods that feel like they're good for your body. Don't eat foods that make you allergic. And it's the same with your topic of meditation. When you take this topic of meditation and make it your foundation of mindfulness, you evaluate the world not through the opinions of other people, but through the effect that it has on your topic of meditation. That becomes the filter through which you start to see the world. If I'm going through the world and the breath is my topic of meditation, I don't become so concerned about what another person said to me, although I may be. My primary concern at that time will be, what effect does this have on my breath? I mean, does it make my breath uncomfortable? Is it making bad qualities arise in my mind? And if so, how can I use my breath to change my emotional state? How can I use my breath to bring my mind back into balance? And what this does is it puts our world more and more under our control and removes that control from other people. And in doing so, we become more and more untouchable. It becomes more and more difficult for the ways of the world to affect us, and the cloth gets cleansed even more. So when this becomes a very steady habit, when one develops this very consistently and very deeply, you start to realize that the mind has these layers to it. So kind of like a layer cake, or like in Canada, I often use this example if anybody's ever swam in Canada, the United States, or places that have freshwater lakes and aren't warm all the time. Then these lakes actually have these layers to them, and they call them thermoclines. So if you dive down in a lake in Canada, the top layer is nice and warm in the summertime. But 3 or 4 feet down, there's this border. When you go through the border, it's not like a sharp line, but it's this kind of hazy line. You go through it, and suddenly it's colder. The next 3 or 4 feet might be colder than that, or 5 feet, and then gradually it gets colder. So there's these layers to the lake based on how it's heated. And based on the perceptions that a person develops and carries throughout the day, there's layers to the mind. There's like outer layers, there's inner layers, there's deeper layers. And if you dive down into the lake, even if it's raining on top of the lake, even if there's wind that's whipping up the waves, when you look back, you don't really perceive all of that if you're dived into the lake. If anybody's ever been scuba diving, even if there's like a storm, the water just kind of moves like this. It's just like, it's like, it's not really that disturbing. I mean, you can easily swim against that. And you look up and there's just these little drops on the water. You're not getting soaked. You go up to the surface, okay. Now it's getting pushed around. So as you learn to focus more and more on a single object, the perceptions that a person has that are affiliated with the world start to fall away. And the way in which they perceive the world becomes more simple. And as it becomes more simple, it actually becomes more bright. That's one of the very unusual things that one would not necessarily expect about simplifying the mind. So the Buddha has this phrase, he says, bhikkhus, the mind is radiant, but it's basically clouded by defilements that come. So in other words, when you remove the defilements, when you remove the clouds, then the sun starts to shine almost on its own. And these deeper and deeper layers of the mind that a person takes themselves down to by focusing on a single thing, by not getting whipped around by the things of the world, will make the mind radiant, will make the mind bright. So there's a sutta in which Venerable Anuruddha is staying in this forest, and he thinks these 8 thoughts of a great man. And so, or 7 thoughts of a great man, he's thinking them, and then all of a sudden the Buddha, he knows what's going on in Anuruddha's mind, and he appears. And I was listening to a Dhamma talk of a teacher I really respect, and he said, well, imagine what that'd be like. You're just thinking something, and all of a sudden the Buddha's there. So Buddha shows up, and he appears, and he says, it's good that you thought these 7 thoughts of a great man. Think this 8th one, and you give this 8th thought of a great man. Then he says, when you think these 8 thoughts of a great man, and you basically develop the 4 foundations of mindfulness, then you'll dwell in the jhanas. And when you dwell in the jhanas, then you're dwelling at the root of a tree, will seem to you like a gabled mansion, with many different rooms, that you don't have to vacuum. He didn't add that. I added that. I added that part in. Your meal of alms food will seem to you like a householder's, like curry, banquet basically, with all these curries spread out. He said, your robe of rags will seem to you like a householder's clothes chest with all these different clothes, and your medicine of fermented urine will seem to you like a medicine chest, basically full of all these various types of medicines. And that's how it is when the mind is bright. Because when we rest our mind on things that are external to us and our mind becomes tarnished, then whatever it is we encounter, wherever we look, the world appears tarnished. But when our mind becomes bright, wherever it is that a person looks, whatever they see, whatever they experience, has this feel of brightness to it. And that further takes the mind back from the world, and that further cleanses the cloth. Now here we come to a point in lay practice, the Buddha's recommendations for lay practice, that is like a thermocline. So again, in all of these various phases that we've been talking about, all these various things that you can check off the list, it's a choice. I mean, if you want to check it, you can. I mean, there's nobody who's going to force anybody to check these things off. But if one wants to strive to be a noble disciple as a lay person, these are the Buddha's recommendations. Now, this thermocline is one where a person's life as a lay person really starts to change, and that thermocline is keeping the 8 precepts all the time. So the Buddha had these 2 classes of lay disciples. One class he called Gihi Odantavasana Kama Bogino. And that basically means, like, Venerable Sudasa is an expert at Pali. As far as I understand, it basically relates to this idea of like a lay person eating sensual pleasures. It's almost like you're consuming sensual. Bogino is related to eating. Or Bojana, is that correct, Sudasa? Yeah. So it has this kind of feel to it of eating sensual pleasures. The other type of lay person is called Gihi Odantavasana Brahmacharino. So that means a lay person clad in white who's following the Brahmacharya. Now, all of the lay people who were noble disciples at the time of the Buddha that we're going to examine today, and who were noble disciples in the modern day, not all of them, but the ones we're going to examine today, they were of the second class. Now, it is possible to become a noble disciple in the first class. I mean, the Buddha makes that clear. There were many at the time of the Buddha. But depending how far a person wants to go, depending how much they desire this is an additional tool. It's an additional step that one can take. So let's jump in there and talk about some of the examples of people in both the ancient and modern world who have become noble disciples, and especially in the ancient world, anagamis as lay people, and in the modern world, there are many or different examples of lay people who've actually reached the end of the path. But here we're going to talk about one who is not at the end, another one who did reach the end. So we'll start with the ancient disciples. So the Buddha's ancient disciples among lay people, the 2 that he said were his standard and model, were Hataka of Alavi and Chitta the householder. So Hataka of Alavi, he was this very, very humble man, and Chitta the householder, he was a bit mischievous actually. If anybody's ever read the suttas with Chitta the householder in them, he often goes in and asks monks difficult Dhamma questions. And he's kind of a little mischievous. Sometimes there's one sutta where he's asked this monk to display psychic powers. And the monk does, and then he leaves the monastery and never comes back. He's like a little bit of a mischievous person. So these were his standard and model. I believe both of those were celibate. There was another lay person who's named Uga of Vesali, who we'll discuss in a bit more detail. And the first time he saw the Buddha, he had a feeling of faith. And he took on the 5 precepts with celibacy as the 5th precept. And then he went to his wives. He had 4 wives, and he said, "Sisters, I've met the Buddha. I'm taking on the 5 precepts with celibacy as the 5th. If you want to live with me, you can live with me and enjoy my wealth and make merit. If you want to go to another man, I'll give you to another man." So he said his eldest wife, his most senior, his chief wife, said, "I want to go live with this other man." So he got the other man and he brought them together and he poured water to give this young wife of his to the other man. But he said, as he was doing this, he felt no grief. He said, when he listens to the Dhamma, he listens attentively, not inattentively. He basically serves monks respectfully. And these are all astounding and amazing qualities that he has. And the devas come and converse with him. These astounding and amazing qualities. Another of the Buddha's lay disciples, who was a woman, who was one of his foremost female lay disciples, was named Nandamata. And there was one time she was chanting these set of verses, and this Deva king heard her chanting the verses and stopped down. She said, "Oh, it's very nice to hear your set of verses." He said, "Well, let that be your guest gift." And then he told her that Venerable Sariputta and Mahamoggallana were coming the next day. So she tells Venerable Sariputta this, and Venerable Sariputta says, "That's astounding, that's amazing." And then he asks her about her qualities. She says, "I have many astounding and amazing qualities. I had an only son, and the rulers arrested him on some pretext and had him executed. But as he was being arrested, as he was being taken to jail essentially, and as he was being executed, I felt no alteration in my mind." She said, "When my husband died, he was born among the yakas, but as he was being born among the yakas, when I learned this, I felt no alteration in my mind." And she said, "Anytime that I want to, I achieve the 4 jhanas without trouble and with ease." So she had all these astounding and amazing qualities. Now, when we break these ancient disciples up, we see basically 2 paths from the householder life if one is taken on the brahmacharya. One path on the householder life when one is taken on the brahmacharya is that people almost have like a retreat situation. So Chitta, the householder, was like this. He was very wealthy. Same with Hataka of Alavi. They were both very wealthy. It seems that they didn't really have to work. Chitta, the householder, had his own monastery and essentially could be on retreat. This other person, Nandamata, she was basically working and had like a husband and these things. So you see this kind of divergence for lay people who take this extra step. Now in the modern day, there's also this same divergence. There was a lay woman in modern Thailand. Her name was Upasaka Ki. And she was a very interesting case, actually. Her mother was very, very faithful and would take her to the temples very, very often. And when she was 6, she saw her new sister as a newborn baby, and she saw this mop of hair and kind of a pink face, and she got so disgusted, she vowed that she would never become married. So she decided she wouldn't become married. And she started to practice meditation increasingly and gained very, very good results and was eventually able to teach her father on his deathbed. Then she took on a business to support, I think, her father until he died. And once he passed away, she went to live at this house with her aunt and her uncle and practice meditation there, basically full-time on retreat. So she's actually one of the lay people in the modern age in Thailand who I believe is thought to have attained arahantship, just as a lay person, and she had no teacher. But she was basically on retreat full-time, living like a monk. There's another very famous lay woman in the modern age, and her name was Deepa Ma. And she was married to her husband when she was 12 years old. And they wanted to have children, but it was very difficult for them to conceive. So after a certain amount of time, she was able to conceive, and her husband, who was a very kind man, passed away. But she was stricken with grief because he was such a central pillar in her life. So she developed all these very terrible health issues, like hypertension and maybe heart problems, various health issues that she couldn't get away with. And she was stuck in her bed and basically couldn't even climb the stairs. So then one day when she was laying in her bed, these verses from the Dhammapada appeared in her mind, which said that basically suffering arises through attachment, more or less, as far as I remember. And because of that, she went to the monastery to meditate. As it turned out, she was a very gifted meditator, and at her first time on meditation retreat, she was walking, and then suddenly she couldn't walk, and she couldn't figure out why. She kept trying to walk but couldn't move. She looked down, and a dog had bit her leg. It was hanging onto her leg, which is why she couldn't move. Her concentration had gotten that deep. So eventually a friend of hers who was named Anagarika Munindra took her to see Mahasi Sayadaw, and she quickly made progress through these stages of insight in that system and is believed to have achieved the first of the stages of enlightenment. And once she did, all of her health problems disappeared. Her hyperthyroidism, all these things, and she was able to walk and do all these things normally. The Burmese government eventually decided that it would kick out all foreigners, I think in 1967 or so. And so as a result, she had to leave. She decided to leave and go back to Calcutta, where she lived in this very simple apartment, sleeping on a straw mat and actually sharing a bathroom with another family above a metal grinding shop. So it was like, can you imagine living above a metal grinding shop? That'd be terrible. I mean, even living in the same block as a metal grinding shop would be rough. So it was here that she started to practice meditation, and people started to learn about her reputation. And she actually became a sort of meditation teacher to many lay people in the area, and eventually was believed to have achieved the second stage of enlightenment. Now, her teachings to lay people were very interesting. She taught them to practice in their lives as they were. So she would teach them that whatever you're doing, you have to try to be very, very mindful of it. But she was also very strict. So you had to keep the 5 precepts, and you could only sleep 4 hours a night as a layperson. It's going to work normally. And she had many students who seem to have accomplished this. She's also believed to have had lay students who became noble disciples themselves. One of her lay students who's believed to have become a noble disciple was a mother and had no time to do much meditation. So Dipa Ma taught her to pay close attention to the feeling of the child sucking on her breast for milk, which is also very rhythmic. And as the child was doing this, apparently she attained stream entry. Another of her lay disciples, she was very, very busy. I think she had a disabled father, business, something like this. She was trying to run to support her family. She went to see Dipa Ma and she said, I don't have any time to meditate. So Dipa Ma said, let's meditate right now for 5 minutes. So she was able to meditate with Dipa Ma for 5 minutes, and then she said, throughout her life after that, she started noticing she had more and more time to meditate. It was actually like an excuse she was making to herself. Sometimes she would come home from work and then practice meditation the entire night. And eventually she was meditating several hours a day. So this is the second model that we see for lay disciples, that it is possible to practice in a lay life, but it might start to look really different than a normal lay life if one wants to strive for stream entry. So these two things come together in basically a simple principle, which is that there is really only one Noble Eightfold Path. I mean, there's not a Noble Eightfold Path for lay people that they walk and a Noble Eightfold Path for monks that they walk. It's the same thing. The same Noble Eightfold Path. If you achieve the noble attainments as a lay person, the results are the same. It's just that the track to get there is much wider. So if you steadily narrow the track down, depending on how far you want to go, you can check that off the list. It will make the cloth cleaner. If you manage your relationships, if you take up a satipatthana, or even if somebody decides to take on the brahmacharya for various periods of time, this will make the cloth cleaner. But that in and of itself will not be what it is that helps a person to step over, helps a person to, that actually causes a person, I should say, that actually makes the change. That will come from dispassion. That will come from a person's ability to investigate what it is that's really making them happy and what's really making them suffer. Because this principle of anicca, of anatta, that's present in all of the things that we love and all of the things that make us suffer. If we let go of the things that we like to do, that we break the 5 precepts for, we can see this more clearly. If we let go of the people we want to be in our life, but don't want to be in our life, we'll see that more clearly. If we learn to balance our relationships such that we engage with people long-term basically only when it's +1+1, we'll come to see that more clearly. We'll see it more clearly when we can eliminate our debt through lack of indulgence. We'll see it more clearly when we can manage our money through lack of indulgence. We'll see it more clearly when the weight of our happiness shifts from people outside to our satipatthana, to our happiness inside. But we'll see it most clearly when all those things come to a culmination for a lay practitioner, and they realize that whatever it is that they've been trying to manage, whatever it is that they've been trying to cling to, all of that is a cause of suffering. And their desire for something better needs to build. It needs to build until their desire for something better is greater than their life, and their fear of not having it is greater than their fear of death. And this is when the cloth can be properly cleaned so that it can take the dye. And if it takes the dye, then that's the realization that you can get. That whatever it is that's subject to origination is subject to cessation. And it's not worth hanging on to. And after that, your life will not be the same. You'll become a person like Dipa Ma, a person like Upasaka Ki, a person like Nanda Mata, Uga the householder, a person who is safe, a person who is secure, but a person who's made a trade, who's traded the lower happiness for the higher. And that is a trade that you will not regret. Okay? So, so what we can do is have a little bit of questions. We've got about 15 minutes till the end of the program. That's some of the Buddhist teachings on lay people. Does anybody have any questions about that related to lay practice in general?
Just in terms of the debts, it's just very unrealistic for lay people that not to take a debt. For example, like home loan, who would be able to have their home paid off?
Yeah.
Especially if, like, for younger generation, I'm talking about, right? Like I don't know, it's just like in a realistic point of view,
Mm-hmm.
to reduce the debt. But like, well, we can say renting, but sometimes may not be practical because they may be forced to move out year after year or a few months because the leasing may be restricted.
Mm.
So how do they kind of be more practical in terms of debts?
Yeah, I mean, that's a really difficult one to manage, is mortgages. But I do know people who've spent their whole life renting. They've had a kid.
Right.
Actually, I think they read this book or heard about this thing called the wealthy renter,
Yeah.
where they would basically take whatever money they would spend on their mortgage over and above their rent and invest it in some kind of stock mutual fund or something like this, maybe an index fund.
Okay.
So something that gives like a 10% return. And if you do that and you're disciplined with your finances in that way, you can end up much wealthier than somebody who's had a mortgage and is actually paying a bank. Whatever, a compound interest on a mortgage by the end of its life is huge. It's massive. You've paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to a bank. So,
Almost double.
is it almost double?
It's
Yeah.
almost, you're almost paying double for the house
Right.
when you pay a mortgage on it.
That's right,
You
yeah.
can do the calculation and find out, okay, I've got a loan for 30 years, the interest,
Yeah.
in America that's solid. Here the interest change or every year, all the time.
Mhm.
But you can work out, I might have an average of 2% or 10%, let's say 10%. You put 10% compounded over 30 years, you've paid more than double the price of the house.
Paid a high, yeah, paid a high price. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Never wanted a mortgage, never had a mortgage, too much trouble.
Right.
But then I moved.
Yeah.
Move from time to time. Yeah. Yeah.
Until the last, because I'm 67 now, and until the last 10 or 15 years, I moved about every 18 months or two.
Wow.
I was a mendicant in a different way. But I've been very solid recently.
Yeah.
I just want to say that's actually a good thing, moving regularly, because then you naturally start getting rid of a lot of your excess possessions. So at our monastery, we used to change rooms every few weeks.
Mhm.
And when you have to change rooms every few weeks, then you start downsizing one back.
Right.
So actually,
That's-
moving all
that's
the
true,
time is a
'cause
good plan.
In the last 15 years, I've been relatively stable, 4 years in one place, now 6 years in this place. I have over 1,000 books. And there's e-books as well. So, for me to move now would be massive hassle.
Mhm. Can all fit it on a phone now, can't you? All those books?
Huh?
All those books can fit on a phone now, can't they?
I've got a couple of hundred on the phone too.
Nice. Yeah.
It's true, I could have, but, Amazon's not rich enough.
Yeah, and also for people owning a home, like they might still move after a couple of years. It's very rare people living in one place like forever for 10 or 20 years.
Mm.
Yeah,
Just because you have a home that you think you're stable, no, you have to maintain it.
yeah.
It's a pain. I'm just living example. It's a pain.
Plowing, cutting the grass.
Yeah, cutting the grass and then, yeah. But can I ask a quick question? I found it, I came from Indonesia. Right? We have cultural differences compared to Australia.
Mhm.
Our education system is different to here.
Mhm.
I learned from the kids actually. Some from the kids, right? Because back in East Asia, you are taught that don't argue, just listen and do it.
Mhm.
Right?
Mhm.
You came here, the kids were like, why not? Why not? Then you have to adapt. Right?
Uh-huh.
Same thing with the work. You have to adapt.
Mhm.
I found it sometimes it's tiring, Bante, right?
Mhm.
it's so tiring because every time you change job, wherever there's a different different organization, have a different rule, you have to deal with different people. How do we keep up with that?
With the adaptations.
The adaptation, yeah, even even like meditation, Bante. On a good day, sometimes you think, I'm so tired, I'm not going to meditate. But sometimes you meditate, when even you're tired, then that's a pretty good meditation. And sometimes you have a good day and you try to meditate, I can't even focus. But how do you find the balance of that? You know?
Yeah.
How do you know? I know you try to investigate. There's no, is there a shortcut, Bante? Or just, okay, let's take the book. Okay, no, I should aim for this.
Right. Well, I mean, all those things change so fast, right? And you're in IT, you're not IT, but you're in computers, so that changes really fast. So, I mean, in general, there's a couple ways to approach it. One is through observation, and observation is aided by a clear mind. So the more that the mind is spinning around, the less observant it generally is, and the less it's going to be able to see how to adapt to a particular new pattern that's arisen in life. The second one that you basically always want to be trying to use is to approach somebody who has experience with this new culture or whatever it is, who already looks like they're living the lifestyle, living the way that you want to live, and then ask them how they do it. So that's essentially the shortcut. I once asked this senior monk, I was like, is there any way to advance in practice other than, you know, going one way and making a mistake and like going the other way and making a mistake? You know? He said, no. But if you ask advice from another person, that can save you a lot of trouble because they'll tell you what mistakes they made and that avoids you having to repeat them.
Yeah, like a mentorship, right? Like,
Yeah.
That's what common.
Yeah.
Thank you.
It's time for one more, yeah. A
Um,
couple more maybe.
the Buddha was fasting, and he got to a point where he realized that he might die.
Mm-hmm.
And he wasn't afraid of death.
Mm-hmm.
He just thought enlightenment would be different when he was dead to when he was alive, because the solution that he sought was for the suffering of the living. At least this is the way I've heard this story. It seems to me that two related things, that on that basis it's possible that enlightenment in the monastery is different to enlightenment for a layperson because of the, not maybe essentially, but because of the process that you have to go through to experience it. And it's one of my jokey ways of putting it is that what use is an enlightenment from the forest if you lose it as soon as you see a woman's ankle in the village? And so I wonder about what you were talking about. When we do Vipassana and do the meditation, the first retreat I did, I was just trying to cope. 10 days was trying to cope. And it was actually 7 or 8 years later that I remembered that the leader, Goenkaji, was saying, concentrate on change. And then when I realized that if I focused on my thumb and just concentrated on the changes that were going on in my thumb, and then spread out to all of the changes that were going on in every sensation that I had and the sounds around me and things like that, and I got to a point where I felt like I was at the bottom of the ocean and all of the currents and waves and ripples were happening, but I was the water, and so it didn't make up. All this came, ripples and currents and changes were everyday sensations and experiences. But as water, you're still water, whether it's ice or clouds or an ocean in a hurricane. Occasionally I still have that experience, but now 30 years later, I'm still working. But I have been drawn to the monastery often and have felt that for me, the challenge of lay life is, and almost feel like past lives I've already done quite a lot of monastic work, because I took to this when I was 13, very early. And then the lay life is what is the most challenging for me. And that's why I continue with it. I don't think it's better or worse or anything, it's just for me. But that process of the lay person you were talking about, of turning everyday lay activities into meditation. Those days when you're programming something and you wake up, you've been really highly focused into it, and then it's 7 o'clock and I was supposed to leave at 5. And I've just spent 6 hours or 10 hours, and it's, so you're in that highly focused place, and it has worked. You're untouched by the world. You just enjoy. It feels blissful too. You feel centered and strong. And yet, you've been working with the computer programming, or you've been. The one I found really hard was working in a call center where I had to ask just 6 questions. 5. And they expected me to do 30 seconds or 1 minute per call.
Right.
I called it an interactive mantra, because I had to put it into the computer and do it. And I was bad at it, very bad at it. But I was good at talking to people. So they gave me a promotion to get me away from that. But that's what I'm saying. So I don't know if there's a question in there. It's a comment and a sharing.
Sure.
But that process of finding the way to turn almost any activity into a meditative experience or
Right.
process or part of the path.
Right. So I'll tell you what, I'm going to try to answer in like 30 seconds. And I'd also like to open it up for Venerable Sudaso and Venerable Sona, or Ayasoma. Sorry. That was just a tongue twist. And we'll try to get it in 1 minute. 1 minute answers, do you think we can all do? Then we can make it down to the last one. So here we go. So, I mean, I actually had that attitude too when I was a lay person. And I tried really, really hard to make all of my daily activities mindful. But what I noticed was that at that time, whatever momentum I gained from meditating for like 45 minutes in the morning, no matter what I did, it just seemed to keep going down throughout the day, unless I did formal meditation. So there is definitely a huge benefit to turning in my experience, to turning daily activities into meditation. And it's recommended by the Buddha in a category called Sati Sampajanya, and Dipa Ma used it to really, really good effect. But just counterbalancing, that there really is a power in formal meditation, and that there is also there is the model of the layperson who practices with their life. There's also the model of the layperson who remains a layperson but lives like a monk. So it's good to keep in mind that both of those are there, and that there is a strength to formal practice. So just saying that as a balance, not as a disagreement. Sudaso, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, thank you. First off, the story you told about the Buddha fasting, that's not in the canon. So I don't know where you heard that from, but it's not true. There was a time before the Buddha attained enlightenment where he was trying different spiritual practices, and one thing he tried was different forms of fasting. And at one point he tried complete abstinence from food for a period of time, but he eventually realized, 1, that it wasn't working, it wasn't actually helping his meditation improve, and 2, some devas told him that they were going to magically inject food into his body to keep him alive. So the Buddha realized, 1, it wasn't working, and 2, it wouldn't be true, because the devas were magically intravenously feeding him anyway. But this was long before he attained awakening. So this concept of enlightenment being for the living and not for the dead, it was always for the living. Plus there are no dead people, they don't exist. Because when you die, you just get reborn somewhere. So enlightenment was always for the living. Also, there's no difference between the enlightenment of lay people and the enlightenment of monks. Enlightenment is just enlightenment. It's the same for everyone.
And I would just, the cherry on the cake, that I think for both monastics and lay people, there is a good practice of paying respects and gratitude. So I would like to invite everyone to bow 3 times to
Oh, okay.
and pay respects.
Well, we were hoping to hear your insights too.
This is a good insight.
Okay, very good. Okay, so that way, good. May you be well, happy, and peaceful, and may you attain Nibbana.
Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu.
All right, we better sneak in there. I think Tina might get me in trouble. I'm a little bit scared. So.
Thank you for beautiful talk.
Thank you guys for coming.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. Yeah, so we'll get to talk more.
Yeah,
Coming to that
coming,
army.
yeah, I'm coming to Paramount. We end this live, so.
Are you changing your mind? No, the answer to that.